All right, all right, all right. Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition number 3 of the Irish Breakdown podcast today. Had a recruiting show earlier today with some big news. You guys had a show tonight, Vince. I know you talked a little bit of recruiting, a little bit about Coach Freeman's press conference today, and we are going to have our upon further review. We're going to put the finishing touches on the Notre Dame win over Navy.
And then
we'll talk a little bit about the offense. Yes, yes.
No more Navy
and then
talk.
we're not going to have any graphics tonight, Vince, because it's really not kind of stuff that we could show, because a lot of it's like you'd have to watch it live. Yeah. But we're gonna talk about it because there was definitely a lot to discuss, Vince, and it's just we're gonna focus on the offense tonight, and I felt like this game was we saw a microcosm of this team in one game, which is when they're on, they're pretty good, and when they're not, and there's not a team in college football that's a greater Mountain Valley team than Notre Dame. But
crazy.
The reality is I argued this Sunday after the game, and there's definitely some people that didn't agree with me. And the one thing I'll say is this was progress, though, big picture.
Yes.
The reason I say that is progress isn't always pretty. Progress isn't always big. Progress isn't always like giant leaps, and progress doesn't always come with positivity. Progress is, are you doing things differently now, and are you growing and developing? And the thing I would take away from this game is if they would have played this game the way they played against Stanford and Marshall, they'd have lost. Mm-hmm. They didn't. They made the plays they needed to make. We did see a good half from the offense, and it was a step forward. It was a baby step, but it was a step forward, and that's the biggest takeaway. And Notre Dame is 7-3, and the playoff rankings tomorrow are still going to matter for us, and we're still going to have something to discuss.
For sure.
And, again, is you get to this journey of Notre Dame getting to where they need to get to. It was a progress. It was a baby steps, but it was progress.
Let me ask you a question, and this is kind of a macro, big picture type question. Okay, mm-hmm. Would you feel better or worse if the game was flipped? So, like, they came out flat.
Oh yeah,
and then they came back in the second half and just dominated. Would you feel better about that? Because I was going to. Okay, yeah, I agree with you. But
I'll tell you this, Vince. If you'd have asked me that on Sunday, I would have said yes. But as I've thought about it, I say no, and here's why. The concern we've had is this team they play to the level of their competition, right? And you ask yourself, are they going to come out in this game, and are they going to play with the emotion they need to? Are they going to come out with the focus they need to? Right. And I thought they came out, played hard. I thought they were hitting people. I thought all those kind of things. I think what we saw was a team that just, once they got up big, they didn't respond to that success really well. And I would have probably felt a little bit different, because if it was the reverse, I'd have said you came out sloppy, you played like trash, and in the second half, you just out-talented them.
Right.
I actually felt like this team came out in a way where you felt like they put in the work during the week of practice. They focused on the things they needed to. They came out with the right mentality, and they buried Navy early. And all three phases contributed. Now, the defensive game plan was not great. I didn't love it. We're not going to spend any time on that, because it doesn't matter, because they're not going to play the triple option again. Right. And as I joked with Sean Stiers earlier, I said, that's like the 5th time I've said that, and that means they're going to get Air Force in a bowl game. But unless that happens,
I know, right?
It's just this defense deserves the benefit of the doubt for how it's played against every non-triple option offense that it's faced this year.
Not having J.D. Bertrand was huge in this
and Brandon Joseph
game. And Brandon Joseph. Yes, I agree with that. Yes. And that can't be taken like against any other team. Is that a loss? Yes, but I think it's even bigger in this particular game with the way you have to be against Navy, right? You have to be coming downhill. You have to read your keys. You have to be disciplined. All of that. So that's why we're not talking about the defense. I mean, that's why we're not. And I agree with you. That's why I wanted to pose that question to you, because it was a situation for me where they answered the question for me. Would this coaching staff have this team ready to play against an inferior opponent in this situation? And I thought, as I'm watching the whole first half, I get to halftime, I'm thinking, yeah, they answered that question. Like, that was a question we were asking all week long. How are they going to respond coming off of a big win over Clemson, right? they responded. Second half was a different conversation, but they responded at the beginning of the game, and I think that is key. So if you're giving me the option whether I want the stronger first half or the stronger second half, I'm taking the stronger first half because I think that says more about the preparation and the readiness for this team to play this game, for sure. No question about that.
The other thing too, Vince, is it does show too that this staff has some adjustments it needs to make as well in its inability at times to adjust.
Absolutely.
That's problematic. I mean, look, the reality is Notre Dame offensively has not been a great team this year in the first quarter or the third quarter. Well, that's kind of problematic. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of a big deal. Yeah. I mean, that's something that they've got to figure out. It's second and fourth. I mean, I'm looking at the points now. Notre Dame this year has scored 57 points in the first quarter, keeping in mind that 23 of those came against UNLV. And they have scored 38 points in the third quarter. They have given up 109, or they've scored 109 in the second quarter and 93 in the fourth quarter. And so coming out of the gate, they're just not good on each side of the ball. Now, offensively, they were much better against Navy. So if you look at it, they scored 23 in the first quarter against UNLV and then another 14 in the first quarter against Navy. Well, they scored in the only two possessions they had in the first quarter.
Right.
And so offensively, it was a good step forward. They did what they needed to do against a not very good defense, scored 35 points in the first half, and then the second half you did nothing. So the second half adjustments were bad, but I don't think it was actually I said the second half adjustments weren't great. They weren't bad, they weren't great. They were just kind of okay. It was an execution problem in the second half, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And we've been hammering Tom Reese all year, but I've always said I'm going to be fair. And I'm not going to hammer him just to hammer him. And so we'll talk about some of the things I liked and didn't like in the second half. But it was really a lot of it was execution, Vince. But I think defensively was really where I was the bigger concern about the halftime adjustments. But that's something that's going to have to get fixed. This team has just not been great coming out of the gate in the third quarter, really all season. And defensively, the most points Notre Dame has given up in this season is they've given up more points. They've given up 83 points in the first half. They've given up 140 points in the second half. Now, part of that's fourth quarter, 80-some points. Gave up some garbage touchdowns to UNLV, some garbage touchdowns to North Carolina. But still, 87 points. You've given up 140 points in the second half, and you've given up 83 in the first half. That's a problem. It's like the offense and the defense have opposite problems. The offense comes out of the gate slow and gets better. The defense starts well and then fades in the second half. Those are things you have to look at and figure out why, what's going on. And so offensively, Vince, I think the biggest thing from this game to take away is the run game was a problem in the game, and it wasn't just Navy's numbers. And that's what I was expecting to see when we broke down the game, was that it was just going to be Navy's numbers. There were some things Navy's defense did that created problems. They did a lot of line games, a lot of movement up front that the offensive line had a hard time with.
That they haven't seen. And
so
but that's not an excuse. I want to be clear.
There was some overload stuff. Yes, there was some overload stuff. That one of the things I think hurt the offense, especially in the second half, is they ran a lot more RPOs than we've seen them run. And there was 6 or 7 times the quarterback just got to pull the ball and throw it. There was at least once where the running back took the ball away from Drew Pine where he was getting ready to pull and throw it. Logan Diggs, I think it was. He was getting ready to pull and throw to a wide open inside stop route. It looked like, because Drew's like going like this and then like does a double take looking at the running back. It looked obvious.
Yep, that's an obvious one.
And then Logan like took the ball from him as opposed to like they were getting real grabby. I think it might have happened one time with Audric Estime too. And that's kind of what happens. You don't run RPOs a lot. So they're gonna have to rep the heck out of that.
Practice that.
The running backs have got to say you can't really latch onto that thing until. I mean, Logan took it out of his hands before the ball got put in his chest, and Drew was looked like he wanted to pull it back. Drew's also got to have better ball mechanics and take that sucker out, because he didn't really have the mechanics that would make Logan Diggs think that he was pulling it out. Same with Audric. So those are just things you have to work on. But there were several times where, you've got 8 guys in the box, a free safety, and 2 off corners. All you got to do is pull. But the thing is like you're not even pulling. You're doing a quick flash and just throwing it, or you're just stepping and throwing it.
It's not
there were times it's not a mesh at all. I remember some of the RPOs Ian Book did against Navy in 2018, Vince. He was just catching it and throwing it out there on 5-yard outs, and that stuff was there.
Yeah.
And so Drew's got to see that better. and he's got to hit those because you hit 4 or 5 of those, and all of a sudden Navy's like, okay,
we can't keep bringing the house. We got to
right. So what are we going to do? I didn't think the O-line played well, and it was just a guy here. It was kind of like it wasn't as bad as early in the season. It was just because of the stuff Navy was doing, the offensive line wasn't sharp. That's not an excuse or justification. It's an explanation. Yeah. They didn't handle the line stunts, and they were doing some unique stuff that I hadn't really seen from Navy, and maybe that's just because I didn't watch every single game, but they were doing some line games that I hadn't seen really before, Vince, like taking the end and like slanting him all the way into the A-gap weak side and then slanting 2 guys this way. It was like, okay, that's kind of weird. Notre Dame didn't pick it up well. And there was just like it was Blake Fisher on one play, Jarrett Patterson the next, and Zeke Curl the next, and Joel the next, and Josh Lugg the next. It was like just kind of one guy. And another issue with the run game is the tight ends, especially Mitchell Evans, had a really rough game blocking. There was 3 or 4 times where you've got a chance to get a little 4 or 5 yard gain, and the Mitchell Evans just got beat across his face, and it's impacting the running back behind the line of scrimmage. So biggest problem from the run game beyond anything else, Vince, was just a sloppy game, right? It's not a justification, but it's just kind of like, okay, we've seen these guys play well for 5-6 games in a row. They had an off game. And now, that doesn't take away from the schematic things that we discussed on Saturday night, but I don't feel the need to rehash that. Everybody knows how we feel. There has to be more diversity in the run game. You've got to do some things to hurt the defense. Not in diversity from a schematic standpoint. You just can't keep running duo every single freaking play. We didn't see the diversity we saw against Navy or Clemson last week. So, I mean, that's a thing, but we've already talked about that a lot. But it just was a sloppy performance, and it was really that way from beginning to end. So that's a part of it too, Vince, I felt. And then I didn't think the running backs were sharp. They weren't as aggressive. Audric was a little bit out of control at times. Logan wasn't. And then Audric got back to kind of – and this happens with sophomores. I mean, young guys, you're going to revert back to bad habits sometimes. You're not always going to be fundamentally sound. Like Logan wasn't running as decisive. I don't want to say as hard. Tell me if you agree with this word a little bit more, Vince. I thought that the line games were messing with Logan's eyes, and he wasn't running decisively. Because I think me saying he wasn't running hard makes it seem like he was like, I don't want to be here.
He wasn't giving the effort. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think he wasn't like, you're seeing guys go this way and that way. And it's like, well, hold on a second. How am I supposed to hit that? He looked like he was uncertain more so than he didn't run hard. And that's was, and then Audric, I just thought was kind of, he was uncertain. So what he did just freaking put his head down and just bull. Yeah. Which is why he had a couple more good runs because he just bowled through the kind of ran through
some guys over.
Right. Yeah. But he wasn't sharp either. I thought that was an issue as well. On top, I mean, so it was didn't love the run game dynamics as far as play calling. Offensive line was sloppy. Tight end blocking, especially from 88, was really bad, and the backs weren't sharp. And then the quarterback didn't help with the RPO stuff. It was
and the backs weren't sharp in pass protection either. I mean,
yeah, we'll get to that. We'll get to that here in a second. Okay. But yeah, run game wise, that was
sorry.
That was no, it's all good, man.
Yeah, no, it's just we're talking run game. You're right.
It wasn't a good day. So it was just one of those things, Vince. There was nothing glaring where like, wow, they got their butts kicked or they weren't coming off the line hard. It was just a sloppy performance. And Navy did some really nice stuff schematically, in the offensive line and the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach didn't really react to it well and pick it up real well. But what they did in the first half was you kept hammering them inside, keeping them into the loaded boxes, and then what did it do? It opened up some big plays down the field. And that's why you're able to rip them up in the pass game. So, I mean, look, if you're going to overcommit to the run game, then you need to be able to rip them up with the pass game, and they did that.
Yes.
And that was the thing in the first half is there was just you had one-on-ones all game in the first half, and as we transitioned to the pass game.
Notre Dame was winning those. I mean,
I
assume they were winning those.
They did great.
It is easy for me to see the way some things were called, thinking that the Notre Dame wide receivers were winning down the field on a consistent basis. They had to.
They were.
Because that explains a lot to me with the way the game was called, if that makes sense.
And what Vince is referring to here, Vince is going off the TV copy. I'm looking off the all 22.
Right.
So, yes, there was Vince. And there was stuff there that he couldn't get to a couple times because the protection wasn't there.
Sure.
It was a really well-called game in the first half, especially well-designed game in the first half.
Yeah.
because you call the game you design. So they go together, but more specifically, I like the play design. They had a very clear third down package. They had stuff to attack the pressures. First drive, 3rd and 8. What do? They bring a 0 pressure on 3rd and 8. You hit the check down to, not the check down, but the angle route to Audric behind it, and you beat it.
Keeps on going. Yeah.
Right. There's their 3rd down and 12, 3rd down and 10. They know they're going to get zone. They bring Deion Colsey on. I mean, that's where Drew was going the entire time on both throws. Those backside in cuts to Deion Colsey. And then, I thought in the first half, Vince.
You did a 4-hour show with Ryan.
So I know, right? The first half, I thought Drew. So the first half, before Navy adjusted, the first read was open a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think that helped Drew. But he also showed good anticipation at times. Like the best throw he's made all year was the touchdown pass to Jaden Thomas. And the reason I say that is because he actually threw that ball before Jaden had got to the safety. So he threw it over top and then let Jaden run to it. He's never done that before and hasn't done it since. He always waits till like the guy's cleared. Oh, he's open now, and then throws it. On that play, he knew, I'm going to Jaden. I got a one-on-one. He read the backside safety, saw that guy went over to cover the corner route to Mitchell Evans. He came right back to the seam, and he just threw it. He hit his drop. He saw it, came back, and threw it. And you're like, dude, if you would do that more often, you'd be really good.
Yes. He was playing with confidence in the past game.
But anticipation, like some of the stuff was like some of the stuff in the first half. Agree. Some of the stuff in the first half, Vince, was this is going to sound really disrespectful, and I don't mean it to be. It was more scheme related than necessarily Drew playing great. And what I mean by that, it wasn't Drew going to his 3rd read, and it was schemed up really well, and Drew got the ball where it needed to go to. So it's not an insult on Drew, so be clear, because he still had to read it and throw it and get it out. It just meant that they had a really good game plan for what Navy was going to do. They were able to isolate different guys at different times, and they were able to get Braden Lindsey going early. A couple of those that were RPOs. They were able to get Jaden Thomas going. You had the Deion Colsey on the 3rd downs. Like, they mixed up what they were doing, and I thought Drew read the looks and got the ball out where it needed to go.
Right.
And the scheme was good. Second half, those guys were still there. They were still open, but they did a couple different adjustments, brought overload pressures from a side. Drew didn't handle that really well. Coach Freeman had said in the press conference today, we didn't set the protection the right way a few times, so I paid attention to that. It was very clear that they didn't set the protection. I mean, there was a couple times it was like 3 guys came off of a side, and like nobody got blocked because you didn't set the protection correctly.
Right. You were over here, and everybody was coming over here.
Yes. Yeah. And, so there was a lot of stuff like that. And then the other thing, too, is it was an execution thing. They would run twists. The guards wouldn't pick up. The backs who were great in pass pro last week were bad. At least the sophomores were bad. I thought Chris Tyree was fine in pass pro, but Diggs and Estimate both were not good in pass pro. It was a bad game for him in pass pro.
Yeah, it was.
And that resulted twice where Drew wanted to go with the ball somewhere, and he didn't. So those were a couple things, and before we just kind of get into some of the issues that Drew had that were issues. And then, of course, the more they started bringing 0 pressure, and they didn't do it every single snap, there needed to be a couple things that Coach Reese went to. So a couple times he went, 12 or 13 personnel. Max tried to max pro and run it downfield, and they were on it because, the play action was kind of a giveaway. What I would have rather seen him do was either spread it out or out of that look, do like do a stretch play bootleg throwback to Chris Tyree or something, or just, spread it out, maybe go trips to a side, have a tight end on the weak side, and go back to that wheel route that worked for you for a touchdown to Tyree in the first half, or, go back to the angle throw. But, so I do think there's some things that the coach could have done differently. But overall, Vince, there's a lot of stuff open in the second half.
Yes.
And it wasn't just Drew. It was a back missing a play here. It was a guard not picking a guy up here. It was a tackle giving up too much ground here. And then you add the mistakes that Drew made, and it was just that perfect storm of badness that led to them having one of the worst halves of execution I've seen in a long time.
I thank you for using that word, because I was about to use it. And this is the first time all season where I felt like the explanation of we didn't execute what we needed to execute was absolutely spot on, right? It's not just an excuse. It's not a word salad in a press conference. That was accurate.
Or us saying, why are you calling those plays and asking them to execute it? It's not that either.
Right.
Because it was stuff that was working. Correct. We've seen him hit all that. There wasn't a thing they tried in the second half, Vince, and we didn't either see him hit in the first half or in the previous game.
Right. Exactly. And it was an execution issue. This is football, ladies and gentlemen.
And a focus issue.
If one person doesn't execute, you're in trouble most of the time.
Especially when they're blitzing like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like
because
if they're rushing 4, Vince, and if they're rushing 4 and your guard whiffs, the tackle can help, the back can help.
Exactly.
But when they're bringing overloads and one guy misses, and all of a sudden you got 2 guys coming free or 3 guys coming free.
Right.
And so it was
Drew can do at that point.
Yeah. And then there was times where they brought 2 corner fires, and I'll never understand this to save my life. Whether it's Tommy Reese as the head coordinator, well, it's actually been a bigger issue the last 3 years, but we've seen it happen in the past. The inability of quarterbacks at Notre Dame to not see corner fires just blows my mind.
It's like, and it almost looks like they're looking at them. Like, I don't know how
you. They did 3 in the second half, and they just no concept of what to do with it. The receivers don't know what to do when they do it. The receivers just kind of don't have any clue how to stop it. The only way they see it is if they're staring at it at the snap. So, like, if they're looking at the left and the corner comes off the left, that's the only time they see it.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of different things, Vince. And then you kind of get to Drew, and I just thought that Drew just was unwilling to let the ball go in the second half. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what was said to him or not said to him or what happened to him mentally. But, like, for example, first play of the second half, they bring a blitz right up the middle, and there's pressure right away. But you got Lorenzo Styles coming across. It was either Styles or Lindsey. But you had one of those two coming across, and there's
it was Styles.
There's just a cross. Yeah, right. There's just a. That's what I thought at first. I was like, well, they kind of look alike.
On the TV copy, that they actually showed it from behind, and you could see him
left or
coming
right.
Across.
Yeah,
you could see him coming across.
So, you say, well, there's a guy in his face, but I'm like, it was the same exact kind of pressure he had in the first half when he, with 3 guys in his face, just threw the ball over the line to get it to estimate for a touchdown.
Right.
And he was unwilling to do that in the second half for some reason, and I don't know why. And so it's like I can't really fault that from a coaching standpoint. They brought more than you can block, which meant somebody was going to be open.
Yep.
It's your job to get the ball out.
Yeah.
So 1st and 10, you dump it off to Lindsey or Styles. Even if that guy pursues and catches him, it's a 5 to 6 yard gain. You're now in 2nd, 4th, or 5 instead of 2nd and 16.
Right.
That right there, bam, you're there. You come out in the drive after they.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Then you get into a situation where, they score to make it 35-24. And the first play, Tommy, great play call. It's protected relatively well. Guy kind of comes free late. But you got Michael Mayer on a wheel route, and it's open for a 30-40 yard gain.
If not a touchdown.
Yeah. He's got to make one guy. He's got to break one tackle, and he's gone, right? And it just should be an easy throw. Like a Division I quarterback should just be able to make that throw. It wasn't that hard. And he just sails it. No touch, just sails it. And it's just like there's a lot of stuff like that, Vince, where it's like, second half 2 is when we really saw him not executing the RPO game real well. There's a lot of opportunities to just pull and throw a 6-yard route, and it's easy. And we just didn't see him do that stuff. And again, some of it was stuff he was doing in the first half. So it's like, we can blame coaching, right? And that's fine.
Right.
But why was it working in the first half and not the second half? There's got to be something there, because it wasn't that Navy wasn't doing things where they're showing pressures and dropping 8, but they weren't doing it in the first half. They did it in both halves. And it was a little bit puzzling to see that from Drew. I'm not going to lie to you, Vince. Like, it was like, dude, why are you not the same thing you saw in the first half?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it at halftime. It's like, wow, this is like best half that Drew's played, He's going through his reads. He's throwing on time. He's doing
taking chances.
Taking chances. That's exactly right. I mean, it was a great half of football for him. And then it was like a different guy came out wearing the number 10 jersey, and he was afraid to take chances, and he was afraid to pull the trigger, and he didn't handle the pressure well. Like you said, he didn't pick up anything coming off the edge, which there was one time at one of the sacks, he got up, changed the play, because he noticed that the blitz was coming, then noticed that there was an overload coming. He either changed the play or changed the protection, one of the two, and still took a sack. Yeah. It's like I don't know what is, what the processing issue was there. I mean, you saw it, you located it, you changed it, and you still took a sack. Like, it was very frustrating. And I'm sure if it was frustrating for you and I to watch, I can only imagine how frustrating it was for the coaching staff to watch.
Right.
To be honest.
Right. Yeah, you could say, there's a couple things they could have done differently to help, but
I agree.
At some point in time, you've got to say to guys, you got to pick that blitz up. Hey, fellas, you got to be able to see that and throw off that. Hey, backs, you've got to be able to do this well. I mean, stuff that we've been doing. Again, it's not like they're asking them to do things against Navy that they've never asked them to do before, and we've seen them fail time and time again. It was stuff that we've seen them do before.
Yeah.
And so again, I don't want to. This seems lazy, Vince, and I, we've spent a lot of time talking about the specifics, right? And it's all correctable stuff, but I don't mean this like I don't care. But what I am going to say is it doesn't concern me, because it is stuff that we've seen them do well. Right. And the reality is sometimes teams just don't have good games, especially when you're talking about a team that's coming off of the kind of emotional game that they had and the big win they had. And, I actually was pleased how they came out.
Sure.
They played hard and did all that kind of stuff. They didn't maintain their focus for 60 minutes is really what it boils down to. And we wanted to give some specific examples and not just say that and then, all right, everybody have a great night. See you all later. Give some specific examples, but it really did kind of come down to where they just weren't as locked in the second half as they were the first half. And you saw flashes of that in the first half, Vince. There was a couple plays where it's like, oh, dude, you got to make that. But Drew was able to get the ball off, or, somebody stepped up and made a play or whatever, and you were able to kind of overcome it. But in the second half, it just shows kind of like that line that can be had between playing really well and not playing well can be just one little thing here, one little thing there, and that's what this unit's got to get a lot better at.
And
it's
again,
just that level of consistency.
From a macro standpoint, right? This is an opportunity because you did win the game. I mean, if we're talking about, the baby steps of getting better, you did win this game, right? And that's an important thing because earlier in the season, they don't win this game. They just don't. They don't win this game.
Yes, that was the point that I was making earlier. Yes. Is it's not to justify the bad game, or
I agree with you.
It's not.
And this is an opportunity though, because the line saw things that they had not seen all year as a group of five. They did not see some of the stunts and the movements and the things that Navy did. Well, any good coach is going to watch the film and they're going to see, okay, this is what Navy did. This is what we're going to do. You know what I mean? They're going to emulate some of what Navy did to try to affect what the Notre Dame offensive line struggled with at times, right? Well, this is an opportunity for the Notre Dame offensive line and Harry Heastan and that whole room to use this as an opportunity to get better. Right. That way, the next time this happens, which, by the way, will probably be on Saturday against Boston College, because Boston College is not a great football team, and they're going to throw the kitchen sink at Notre Dame to try to affect what they want to do offensively, right? And so you're going to see, I'm not saying you're going to see the exact Navy game plan. That's lazy coaching. What I am saying is you're going to see some bits and pieces and some different things and some exotic things. How does the offensive line respond? That's going to tell me a lot about where this group is, to be honest with you.
And they will. I mean, again, that's a unit that I don't have a problem with. And again, I don't want this to come across, Vince, as if we're making excuses, because we're not, because it wasn't acceptable. The point is simply to point out that every failure, so to speak, it comes in varying degrees. And Saturday was not a good performance, but it came in varying degrees. And if you look at the context of it, you can say not a good performance in certain ways, but you also need to be willing to say, but they clearly are better off now than they were a month ago, because a month ago they lost this kind of game to a team that didn't play as hard and wasn't coached as well as what Navy was in Stanford. Losing to Marshall, things like that. So, I mean, they're clearly making progress. You're seeing guys step up and make plays, and this team showed that they're capable of it. They just got to be able to put it together for 60 minutes, and that's one of those things that this team is still learning to do. This team has still – I mean, they've only played one 60-minute game all year, really.
Agreed.
And that was against Clemson the week before. I mean, that was a heck of a performance.
Yes.
From start to finish.
Right.
this is still a team that's maturing. Now, it's not an experience thing because some of the guys that are not maturing are veterans, DJ Brown and, stuff like that, which we talked about. But it's all part of the growing process, and now they're going to have to clean that stuff up. And it's a lot better to clean that stuff up, Vince, after a win than it is a loss. And that's the part where I say, like, it's not okay. There's nothing acceptable about that.
Correct.
And no coach is going to say, hey, guys, we won. It's all good, because that's not process-driven. That's result-driven.
And that's not what my coaching staff is saying right now.
And that's not what we're saying. We're saying is, it's like the whole a win is a win thing. It's not what we're saying. What we're saying is, however, is you can see the difference between how this team stepped up and did what it needed to do and how previous teams did not in similar situations. That's the difference. That's the growth. Now,
that's the process
you also can say, but you can't do that against a USC or you're going to get beat.
That's
doubt. True.
Yep.
It's true. And that's why this stuff has to get cleaned up. And hopefully they'll be able to clean it up soon, Vince. We are going to have just a little mini mailbag, because we're going to go a little short today on some of that. So if you guys have questions, you want to get them in now, go ahead and get them in now. And we'll try to get to them after we finish wrapping up this breakdown. Vince. But I think overall, Vince, I do think one thing that this game showed too, as you watch the second half, is this is still a team that sometimes it seems like there's just a level of in-game leadership lacking at times on really both sides of the ball. And I think that right there is the biggest area where not having J.D. Bertrand and Brandon Joseph was out. Because I think that more than anything hurt the defense, because I didn't like the game plan, but the game plan wasn't the only problem for that. They're just, as Navy started having success, you could just start seeing the players visibly getting frustrated. And there wasn't that veteran that could say, hey, guys, calm down. We're fine. Because you had a true freshman middle linebacker, a true sophomore will linebacker, and then you had a senior at will linebacker who was a big part of the problem, getting penalties and missed assignments and stuff like that. And then Jack Kaiser goes down, and he'd been your best player there for a while. And, you just don't, on this team, you just don't have enough veterans that can step up and say, hey, guys, we're fine. Just calm down. You started to see that a little bit late. They had a couple stops late, and then they give up that last touchdown drive. And so, Vince, for me, I still feel like it shows this was a corner turning game, but it was just like right there. That's it. That's the only part of the corner you've turned, is like that little part right there where you had a chance to really turn that thing. So that's just part of that thing where you have to look at as a team and say, okay, guys, we got to get better here.
Absolutely.
Have to get better
I
here.
agree. I agree. There's a lot of intangible type things that this team doesn't have yet. And I think that there's a lot of potential leadership in the younger classes, to be honest with you, which I think we're going to see maybe towards the end of even this season, and then moving into the off season and into next year, et cetera. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun to watch, but that you can't rely on your younger guys in games like this. You need the older guys to step up and be that vocal leader.
You can't. It's hard to rely on that many young guys against a team like Navy.
Right. Absolutely.
That's the problem. And that's where JD could have helped.
Look, these guys may have seen triple option in high school, right? Because there's a lot of high schools out there that run triple. Nobody runs it like Navy. I mean,
Marist has never played against. I just thought about this. Marist Lufau's never played against triple option.
Really?
Because he redshirted in 2019.
Oh, you're talking about college.
Yeah. Gotcha. And they didn't play. They didn't play Navy in 2020 when he played. And then he didn't play last year. So, you had a senior there, but this is a senior who's never actually taken a snap in college against the triple option.
Same experience as the freshmen that were in.
Right. Actually, Prince Colley has played against the option more than Maris Lufau had. It just kind of hit me. Like, they didn't play Navy in 2020. Because part of me just assumes, he played a lot in 2020, so I'm sure he played the option then. But then I remember, wait a minute, they didn't play Navy that year because of the COVID stuff. So, I think that kind of played a factor in it as well. But look, it's all stuff that's fixable, and it needs to be fixed. And this team has shown an ability at times to fix those things, but at other times, Vince, they've allowed the things to snowball from week to week. And that's going to be the thing we're going to learn about this football team is, okay, can you make those quick adjustments? Do you have the leadership from a player standpoint to say, hey, let's learn from, because it's Vince, this as a coach. It is not an easy balance between moving beyond something and moving on from something. Moving on from something to me is how I view it. Is I'm just moving on from it, is not really taking lessons from it. Moving beyond something means I've absorbed the lessons. I'm not going to let it bother me, but I'm going to still absorb the lessons and then move forward beyond this, knowing that we're going to come out of this better. Moving on means just whatever. I'm not even going to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. I'm just moving on. Right. That's why we said after the game, even though I would not break this game down defensively from the standpoint of, okay, this is what you should have done. This is what you should have done. There are things I'm going to take away, dumb penalties, misalignments, stuff like that, where I'm like, I'm going to show that stuff because that's something I think that you can learn from, Vince, that's not really dependent upon, oh, gee, you didn't play the cut blocks well when nobody else plays you cut blocks.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are all things that I would say I'm focused on. So,
agreed. Absolutely. There's not a whole lot you can take.
Any other thoughts?
I was just going to compound on that. Schematically, you can't take anything away from this game if you're a defensive coach. You know, you can take away some effort plays, right? If there's a lot of coaches that what do they call them? Loafs. They call them loafs, right? You can show some loafs, right? You can pull those out and you can show those. But from a execution and standpoint and from a schematic standpoint, it just doesn't do you any good. You're wasting your time. Right. You're wasting your time because you're just not going to see this again until next September. Right.
Like I'm not losing my mind because Jason Adamiola didn't get his hands down properly to get off a cut block.
Right.
Because nobody else is going to cut block you like that. Exactly. But I would if, like, let's just say in this, I don't remember this happening. Let's say Jason just kind of came off soft and got driven off the ball. Yeah, that's a problem.
That's different.
That's what we're showing. And that's exactly. And that's the point you're making, Vince, is it's one or I'm showing the plays where it's like, dude, you had zero coverage there. Like what? Why are you not focused? Let's address the problem of why you're not locked in. What were your eyes doing? Where were your eyes? Where was your head? Where were your thoughts?
That's stuff a big one. So like if I'm Mike Mickens, for example, right? Or if I'm O'Leary, Coach O'Leary, there's a couple of times where the DBs got beat because their eyes weren't where they needed to be, right? And they didn't see the guy that they were on run right past them, and then they had to grab and they had to do some things that were not good technique things. You can show that because you can show the lack of technique that you've been taught this whole time, and there was plenty of that you can teach, right? We saw that a lot from DJ Brown, right? There was a lot of lack of technique with him. If his eyes are in the right place, he's watching what he's supposed to watch, then he can trust his technique and do what he needs to do because he's not getting beat, he's not getting his hips turned, et cetera, et cetera. That stuff you can coach, but the other stuff, it's just a waste of your time.
Yep. There's a couple comments about the team was too conservative. If you break down that film in the second half, being conservative had nothing to do with it.
Right. Like no. And I knew that on Saturday. Like
they came out throwing in the second half.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were coming out throwing in the second half. I mean, they were taking shots down the field. They just didn't execute.
Right.
That's really what it boils down to. So lessons learned from the game, and that's going to be a key. Knowing that you don't have to face this kind of defense again. And sometimes coming out of this game can be the best thing for a team because you're like, oh, thank God, I won't have to face that crap again. You're almost excited to play a pro-style team again or a college-style team again when you don't have to face that. So, Vince, that's going to do it for the Upon Further Review portion. We're going to do a mailbag next, so get your questions in, everybody. But before we get to that, Vince, you know what people need to do, right? You need to hit that like button. They need to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, which we would greatly appreciate. If you're listening via podcast format, please give us a 5-star review.
And by the way, I found out that you can ask Alexa to listen to the Irish Breakdown podcast, and it's just going to come up. It's fantastic. Nice. I tested it last night for fun. My family was rolling their eyes, but I was like, hey, Alexa, play the Irish Breakdown podcast. And all of a sudden I hear me and Brian. That's pretty great.
Yep.
So
it's pretty cool.
You can all different ways to listen to the podcast, which is awesome.
Yeah. I see somebody bringing up this constant thing about the icing the second half too thing. That just doesn't hold water for me. The long time that, because they didn't have the ball, halftime and then the long drive, that's really not a lot different than coming out before the game. I mean, you're getting warm-ups in. That's just, look, that's not an excuse. It's a reality. It's not really an excuse for me.
Right.
You still had chances to go out and make plays, but also I'd ask too, subscribe to the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And of course, sign up for the CFB Nation channel. See it on the podcast format and on the YouTube format. And if you are someone who's on YouTube somewhat frequently, we would really greatly appreciate it if you'd watch some of the videos that we put out. We're going to put out more this week. Obviously, we'll have the CFB All-America squad is going to put their videos out. State of recruiting. John Garcia and I have already started talking about some things he's going to do and some December plans. So help us get that those watch hours up so we can monetize our YouTube channel. And then we'll start putting even more and more and more out. And we'll keep growing this thing big time.
Beautiful.
So that's going to do it for this edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. But we're not done here, Vince, because we have a mailbag to get to.
Yeah, there's some actually good questions in here.
Yes.
And I may start a couple that you may not like, so you're more than welcome to unstar.
I will check them out.
Basically, I saw a question mark. I was starring it.
Yep. Keith Wiegand says, do you guys fault the upperclassmen for the letdown in the second half? I really kind of get frustrated by this constant use of fault, because it's like, let's go blame everybody. I mean, it's partly the veterans. It's partly them. It's partly coaches. It's partly young players. I mean, there's nobody that doesn't have fault. Everybody's got to play better. Right, I would say anytime, Keith, that your team struggles, I always say if you're going to look for fault, if that's the thing you're looking for, I would say you always look top down, right? For me, I always look top down. Coaches, captains, veterans, starters, depth. I mean,
there's a hierarchy.
So right, there's got to be, and it's a hierarchy of accountability, Keith.
Yes.
For me. So
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we talked about earlier too. And my issue is just with the word fault. We just kind of throw that around like fault. But I get where Keith is coming from. That's why I want to address the question is, that there did need to be some veteran that stepped up in the second half and said, "Hey guys, calm down. We got this. Let's go make a play." Oh, you know what? Right. Better yet, I'll go make a play.
Right.
And we just didn't really see that. And so, I mean, that's gotta be better. But the thing is, we've seen that in recent games. Again, it's not as simple as just say, "Hey, bad game," and move on. That's like fanboy stuff. But there is something to that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't learn from it and address what went wrong and fix what went wrong, but also you don't overreact to it. Like people say, Maris has got to go. Did you not watch the last 3 games? Right? Like if they were playing Army or Air Force next week, I'd say, dude, get him out of the lineup or put him on the edge, right? Like, like you can't
talked about that on Saturday.
But they're not. They're not playing a triple option offense. They're playing an offense that's going to look a lot more like the last 3 offenses he played, where he was really good.
Because they know how to use him in that kind of a defense.
And we as fans got to be better about that too, Vince. Like the coaches aren't overreacting. Otherwise, they'd have 49 different starters this year if they reacted as much as we did as fans to bench this guy, bench this guy, bench this guy, bench this guy. What it is get better. Don't make that mistake again. You've got to do a better job of making sure you're doing the work going into the game, communicating during the game, and somebody's got to step up and make a play, right? We see that on special teams all the time. I mean, constantly happening in special teams.
Yes, sir.
That's why I say it's coach driven, it's leadership driven, and that's something we got to see more of in those other groups. Next question from Phantom Mojo. The receivers made Pine's first half. Most of his passes weren't accurately thrown. The receivers made good adjustments for the catches. I don't agree with that.
I would disagree with that.
There's some.
Yeah. Look, Braden Lindsay made 2 really nice catches. The one that was really high, and then obviously the one on the guy's back.
Which the one that was really high, he was trying to throw over a guy. And then the one deep, I want to see him get rid of that ball, but there was also a free rusher coming free off the backside that didn't get picked up, and he ran away from it, which is partly why. And then the other one was the one that was bad was the first seam to Jaden Thomas where he turned him around. If he just throws that ball 2 more yards to the left, Jaden catches that, he might crease the defense and go for a touchdown.
Sure.
Other than that, I mean, first half, I don't think his passes were. I mean, the end cut to Deion Colsey was right on the money. The pass to Audric Estime was right on the money. I thought he had several throws that I thought were placed well. There's a couple times he turned guys around because he needed to turn the guy around because of where the defense was coming from. So, the pass that he threw to Jaden Thomas was a thing of beauty for the touchdown. I mean, that wasn't Jaden Thomas. Jaden Thomas made a great catch on it, but he made a great catch of a great ball.
It was right here. I mean, it was
right over the safety too, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
beautiful throw,
gorgeous throw,
beautiful throw. And this has nothing to do with you, Phantom. Nothing at all with you specifically. I just find it funny to me because we've been doing this for so long that somebody's actually giving props to the wide receivers because that never happens. It never happens. So I appreciate that part of it.
Look, no quarterback's ever going to have perfect ball placement on every throw. It's just when you don't think a guy can play or a guy has a bad game, you start looking for more things to get pissed about. And that's what I think happens. Well, now let's go back and look at his great first half and find every little fault and every little flaw and say, well, he didn't really play that well, and the receivers, no, he played really well because receivers can't save you if you don't throw the ball.
Right, exactly.
That's football. Sometimes you're going to make the perfect throw to give your guy a chance to make a play, and sometimes you're going to be a little off target, and the guy's got to make a great play. That happened to John Elway, Joe Montana, Tom Brady.
Sure.
That's part of the game. So I think it's misguided to take away from the strong play that Drew had to just dismiss it as the receivers bailed him out. Did the receivers play great? Yeah.
Which is awesome.
But what have we been begging for years? What did we always beg Ian Book to do? Just throw it up and give the guy a chance.
Right.
That's part of being a quarterback. This isn't going to be a perfect throw. I don't have the perfect angle to make this throw. I'm just going to give my guy a chance to go make a play, and he's going to go make a play. And Braden Lindsey did. Jaden Thomas did. And you'll love to see it. Arrow 520 asks, why do we see a lack of runs out of 10 and 11 personnel? I do not see the production for the backup tight ends consistently to warrant the amount of playing time they are receiving. Thanks. Well, number one, I agree with you.
They will never run 10 personnel.
Well, they have this year, but it was like third down, 2 minute, right? You're right.
They're not taking Michael Mayer off the field.
Well, there's a time and a place for it, as we've talked about, because if you need to give them a breather, instead of bringing in the number 2 tight end, bring in
bring in a wide receiver or running back.
I would always say I'd rather go 20 personnel instead of 10 personnel with the lack of depth of this receiving core, just from the number standpoint. But the point remains the same. He's just simply saying from the spread from the spread looks, why don't we see more running? What you have to understand about the backup tight end, I don't agree with this. I'm just explaining. So this isn't a justification. This is me just trying to help you understand why they do it, even though you and I probably agree that it's not ideal. The production they're looking for from the tight end is not pass game production, which drives me nuts, but that's the reality of it. They're looking for run game production. And we saw great run game production in the last 2 games because of tight end blocking is a big role. Tight end blocking stunk on Saturday. Okay. So you don't all of a sudden say, Mitch Evans, give me your scholarship, get to the back of the line because you stunk against Navy. Because he blocked pretty well the 2 previous games,
right.
But yeah, I mean, look, at some point in time against better teams, they're going to have to figure out a way to get the number 2 tight end in the football. Yes. I strongly agree with that.
How long have we been saying that?
There's no question about it, right? But all I'm doing is saying, so I'm not disagreeing with you, Arrow. I'm just simply explaining how they view it, how the staff views it. But I agree. Even in theory, even if the production was there, I do think they're overly 12 and 13 personnel dominant. And to a degree, you got it Saturday. Here's the thing you have to understand about Saturday. You were already limited on scholarships at receiver. Joe Wilkins quits before the game, and Tobias Merriweather's out with a concussion.
Right.
You're a little limited on what you can kind of do out of those looks, right? So, agree with you. I would like to see more runs out of that. Definitely, especially with the way this offensive line blocks, but that's just not who they are. So they're a very 12, 13 personnel dominant team. And it kind of annoys me, but it's been that way for 3 years, really, especially in 2020 and 2022, especially.
Yeah.
Christopher Galloway, do we see more of Prince Colley against Boston College, Vince?
Depends on the injury to JD. To be honest with you, I think if JD is back in a healthy manner, I don't think we're going to see a ton of Prince. But if he's out, then yes, I think you're going to see some Prince Colley just he's kind of the next man up, right? We're
going to see him as much as we saw him before the Navy game.
Right.
As part of the rotation, but he's not replacing Marist. And I kind of think that's kind of how I took the question is more of like, are we going to see him? I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm adding to the context of what I think he's asking.
Yeah.
And Chris, if I'm wrong, please let me know.
Yeah.
I think, Vince, part of the question is sort of a reaction to how bad Marist played against Navy.
Got you. No, he's not replacing Marist. But like you said earlier.
My question for you, since you were critical of Marist,
yes,
do you think it should impact how much he plays against Boston College?
I do not. I do not. I think that he should play because that's the defense that those are the kinds of offenses that he's good at. And I was even more critical of Marist even going into the game. And Brian and I kind of sparred about it a little bit, after the fact.
That's part of the fun, right? What's up?
I have 100%.
People always criticize that you don't disagree with me as much.
I think it was great.
When you actually were disagreeing, I was like, oh, I'm turning into this skid because this is going to be fun.
Turning into this skid. That's great. So you and I said it during the pregame show. This is not a game where I even want Marist involved. I was not happy to see him on the field. Now, because you lost JD, I feel like that impacted some of the things that I would have wanted to do. But at the same time, that's just not a game, in my opinion, where Marist is going to be good. And he was even worse than I anticipated that he would be. Number one, I think he was playing out of position if you have to play him. Because I agree with Brian that if you have to play him, you play him on the outside, not on the inside. That I totally agree with. Right. And you were limited numbers-wise, and so you kind of had to do what you had to do, and I get that part of it. But this is not – and I told everybody going in, this is not a game where Marist is going to be super successful.
Not inside. Not inside.
Yeah. And so he is successful. They have learned how to use Marist playing against, normal offenses. Normal now.
And he's more comfortable.
Absolutely. He's more confident. He's more comfortable. That's where he needs to play. And so, no, this game is a how do I want to say it? This is in a vacuum, right? This is a vacuum game. There are some good things you can take out of it. There's some stuff you can take out of it, but that does not affect my depth chart before or after the Navy game. It is a game played in a vacuum. That's why we saw certain guys in the past play really, really well against Navy on defense and never really see the field again, right? Because it's in a vacuum. It's just such a weird offense to play. So, yes, I continue with my same rotation that I've always had, barring injuries.
Here's one for you, Vince. From Michael Porton. Thank you, Michael, very much.
I wonder what you were going to say.
If Cade McNamara wants to transfer to Notre Dame, is he a take? I feel like he'd be great to have in the quarterback room. Vince, I have a very strong opinion on this, and I'd be very curious to hear yours on this.
I am not a huge fan. I do not want him in the quarterback room. I don't think it would be something that you would want to do. I am not for it. He is not a take for me if I have any say in the matter.
So let me ask you this, Vince. Is that because of what you saw at Michigan or partly because he decommitted from Notre Dame? What are the reasons why you would and answer if you feel both of them are there, answer them separately. Okay. What about him as a player makes you think he's not and again, I don't disagree with you. I'm just trying to get more out of you. Why would you not want him to be in the room? Let's assuming it's either it's him or nobody will be my next question. So right now, just in theory with no context, why would you not want him? And then my second question is, if he was the best option, what would your thoughts be? So twofold. Part one is what are your concerns? And then we'll get into the second one.
So my concerns are, number one, he didn't want to come to Notre Dame in the first place. And that weighs on the situation. That weighs on the opinion for me. It just does. Okay. The fact that he went to Michigan, whatever. That people make mistakes in their life all the time, and it's always a mistake to go to Michigan. So I am big into second chances, so I'm okay with that part of it. But the fact that he turned down Notre Dame and decommitted from Notre Dame, and to do that, that's a different conversation for me. And is that being petty? Fine. But that's where I'm at with that. Now, as far as him as if it's him or nobody, okay, then that's a conversation that I'm going to have with him because I think they do need to bring somebody in. I do.
So what are your issues with this game, right? Or do you have issues with his game? Because so far all you've talked about is he decommitted thing, which is very fair. I mean, big part of my thing too. So please don't take that as a criticism, Vince. It's an honest question. What is it about his game that you don't like? Because I actually have some interesting thoughts on that.
I honestly, and this is being the most honest that I can possibly be, I don't remember specifically watching his film when he was a recruit. I've watched so many films since then that I cannot differentiate, to be honest with you. I remember that I wasn't all that impressed with his decision-making and his gameplay when he was at Michigan, but I didn't watch a whole lot of Michigan. You know what I mean? And so my
you're not a
instinct,
masochist that just watch something you hate. I
exactly. My instinct is that I was not impressed when he played at Michigan. And is he really going to be a huge upgrade to that quarterback room if he comes to Notre Dame, right? They need a number. I still think they need to bring somebody in. I'm not saying they need to bring in a guaranteed starter that's super, super duper good. Now, could he push somebody? Yeah, he could push. He'll be competitive in the room and all of those things. But from what he did at Michigan, I wasn't all that impressed. That's what I'll say.
So obviously the Michigan thing for me is a problem. If it's there will be better options out there that I would prefer.
I agree completely.
If the option is him or nobody, I would definitely bring him in, and I have a couple thoughts on that. So the interesting thing is, and part of the reason I think that Cade was not as successful at Michigan as he could have been and should have been is because they turned him into something that he wasn't. Cade was a gunslinger in high school. He was a run around, throw, off platform. He was that kind of guy. And that's actually why I didn't love him when Notre Dame got him, but I liked him. Is because he had a little bit of that gunslinger to him. You know what I mean, Vince? And I thought he was a kid that could he was, he had some Baker Mayfield to him. I mean, that's really what he had. He had some Baker Mayfield to him. And there were times at Michigan where when they let him play a little bit, he was pretty good. I think of, was it Michigan State? He just ripped Michigan State up. I mean, they ended up losing that game, but he ripped them up. I mean, he came out against Penn State early and ripped them up a little bit. He had a lot of success against Maryland last year, and then they would have games like the Ohio State game where they're just like, don't screw it up, don't screw it up, don't screw it up. And, that's just kind of who he was. Like, you bring in Cade McNamara, he's not a guy I'm handing the job to. I would think that Tyler Buchner could beat him out, or hope they could beat him out. But he also gives you a veteran presence that I think if you turn him loose a little bit, would actually fit into Notre Dame's system a little bit better than he fit into Michigan's system. And he is a kid that led his team to the playoff, much in a similar fashion the way Ian Book led his team to the playoff, where he was a part of the puzzle, he was on the bus. He wasn't necessarily driving the bus.
It. Yeah, right.
He'd take his turns. It's his turn. Ian had those games. It was like, okay, Ian's stepping up, and it's his time, and all that kind of thing. You can keep saying, same person keeps saying pass on Cade. We get it, right? We said that, but we're also now addressing.
It's a different question.
Is it? If it's nobody or him, you can't take nobody. And so you're addressing it that way. So that's kind of where I would say. I just think that that what it would do is if he gets beat out by Buchner, I think he would, he'd give you insurance. Yeah. But the concern there, Vince, is he's leaving Michigan because he doesn't want to be a backup.
He doesn't start. Exactly. And that's
he decommitted from Notre Dame because he was worried about the competition in the room.
Right.
That's probably the thing more than anything.
Yeah,
that it's not even that he decommitted; it's why he decommitted. That is a bigger concern for me.
Yep,
and so that's kind of why I would hope that there are better options out there. And I know there will be. Like, I'm not high on Brendan Armstrong at all. You know that I am not on the Brendan Armstrong train. I would take Brendan Armstrong over Cade McNamara. I would, because I think at least he can kind of run around and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, good questions, Vince, and we're pretty much on the same page. The only reason that I would be a little bit more open to it if that was the only option is just because I do remember watching this film, which is
sure.
Said. I mean, you admitted this is a kid in high school, Vince, that threw for over 12,000 yards and 146 touchdowns.
I mean, there you go.
He was a gunslinger. He was a shotgun gunslinger. That's just what he was.
Yeah.
ERO ERO with mailbag follow-up. I would love to see our big receivers blocking the other team's DBs instead of the tight ends on linebackers. I would love to see our big receivers blocking the other team's DBs instead of you do see that.
It's not really an either-or kind of a thing.
I think what he's saying is like the 10 versus 11 is what he's saying is like he'd rather see 3-4 receivers on the field and then force that team to go to their nickel look and then having Lorenzo Styles blocking a nickel as opposed to Mitchell Evans blocking the third linebacker that they're bringing in because they're in 12 personnel. I think it's where he's coming from. So in that instance, there is a little bit of an either or. I get what you're saying, but look, I think both of them. To me, it's not either or; it's both and. Right. The problem right now with Notre Dame is it is an either or, and so like Arrow and Tommy Rees kind of have like this. It's an either or proposition, and you and I are in the both and category.
Absolutely,
and that's where I would like to see more.
A little bit of that,
and I am somewhat sympathetic to it because they don't have great numbers, and one of your most talented players can't catch the stinking football.
Yeah.
And it's checked out mentally half the time.
Right.
And then,
and then
you couldn't go 10 personnel.
You
couldn't go 10 personnel against
protocols.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
You couldn't go 10 personnel against them. You literally have to put every healthy receiver you have on the field.
Right.
So, yeah. 99-11 Brian Ward. Could 2023 be 220 again? So... Are you referring to Notre Dame being a playoff team?
Yes, from a success
I would hope that Notre Dame – look, I'll say this.
That's what I took from it.
Notre Dame better be better in 2023 than they were in 2020 if they want to be a playoff team. Let's be real about the 2020 season. Let's be really real about the 2020 season.
You're going to talk about the schedule. There's a reason.
That was not one of Brian Kelly's 3 or 4 best teams.
No.
Not even close. And the reality is the COVID year helped them a ton because outside of Clemson and North Carolina-ish, they played nobody. And then when you played Clemson, as we pointed out, you were in a situation where they were missing several of their best players, including the eventual number 1 overall draft pick.
Right.
That year they played 2-9 Duke, 1-8 South Florida, 3-6 Florida State. All right, game 4. You had the Wake Forest game canceled twice. You played 4-7 Louisville, who you beat by 5. You played 6-5 Pitt, who you smacked pretty good. Like that was a pretty convincing. That was a fun game to watch. You beat 3-7 Georgia Tech. So far, one team with a winning record. You beat Clemson, who, again, that was a good win. I don't take anything away from that team, but you have to be honest and admit they were missing several of their best players. And when you played them later with those guys back, they smacked you. You have to be honest about that. So that's 2 teams with a winning record. You played 6-5 Boston College, who you beat soundly, which is, again, good win. You beat 8-4 North Carolina, good win. And then you beat 1-10 Syracuse. So you played 10 regular season games, right? And you played 4 teams with a winning record. 2 of those teams with a winning record were 6-5. So, you're not doing that against next year's schedule with Clemson and Ohio State and USC. You're not facing that schedule again.
Yeah.
If you're going to look at it from a result standpoint, then possibly – we were talking about this earlier. I don't think we were talking about it on the air. I don't know if we were talking about it during the show or not. It all kind of blends together.
Yes, it does.
But I do know I was talking with Sean Davis about this, and I said, the interesting thing about next year is it's important to get a quarterback for next year, whether it's Tyler Buckner stepping up or if it's getting a portal guy, because if you look at around the country, Ohio State's going to have big personnel losses. Now, they're going to reload, right? But still, not having C.J. Stroud's not as, and they're going to be game 4 when Notre Dame plays them. Clemson's going to suffer a lot of losses on defense and offense to a degree. You look at USC's going to still be pretty good, but they're going to lose some dudes. They're going to lose some of their skill players are going to go pro. Some of the guys who transfer in are going to go pro and stuff like that. And they'll still get Caleb Williams back. Mario Williams will be back. They'll still be talented. But you look at a lot of the other teams in the schedule, Vince, and they're losing a lot of guys. So it's in looking around the country, Georgia's going to have big losses again. Bama's going to lose Bryce Young, and they're barely winning with Bryce Young. You look at a lot of the teams around the country, they're going to lose a lot of players, and it's there for the taking if you have the right kind of team.
Right.
And I really believe that if Notre Dame can figure out the quarterback position, whether that's Tyler Buckner or a transfer guy or whatever the case may be, there's going to be a lot of talent coming back on offense. The offensive line should still be really good. They're going to lose some key guys on defense, but they're still going to be really good. It's going to be a lot like that 2020 team, to Brian Ward's question, we're like, man, how are they going to replace, Julian Akwara and Khalid Kareem? Well, they're going to be fine because they've got Dalen Hayes and Adi Ogundeji stepping up, right? Or 2021, how are you going to replace Ogundeji and Dalen Hayes? They're going to be fine because they've got Isaiah Foskey and these other guys stepping up. So I think they're going to have a shot, Vince, if they can figure out. So because just going into next year, they don't automatically figure out the things that made them so inconsistent. That just doesn't automatically get fixed.
Right.
It requires the coaching staff to identify what caused that and then address it. But if they can address those things and find a quarterback, even if they have a lot of guys, like most of the guys that can go pro, then this team's got a chance, especially if just a couple guys in the portal. I think this team has a chance because I think this team is going to be very fast next year and very skilled. Yes. And if the quarterback is what I hope it's going to be, they got a chance to be pretty good. Mm-hmm. They really do. But there's a lot of ifs there, though. That's the thing. As of right now, there's a lot of ifs. There's a lot of ifs.
Yeah.
All right. Matt, a 211 GT. I love that name, by the way, in the car. I am one of the biggest Reese critics, but I would love to see him with an elite QB. Do you feel that he deserves a chance to stay with a first-string quarterback? Well, he had a first-string quarterback. His name was Tyler Buckner, and they didn't look good with him. I'll say this, Vince. Whatever you feel about Tommy Reese, this isn't necessarily a praise of him per se, but we saw last year when Tommy Reese has a veteran quarterback and good offensive line play, he can dial up some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we saw that. We saw that against Florida State and later in the year. When the offensive line plays okay and he's got a veteran quarterback that can execute what he's trying to do, he can put some stuff together now. Now, the question is can he develop a quarterback on his own? That remains to be seen to a degree.
Agreed.
But, that's kind of why there is some optimism depending on who they get at quarterback, man. Like, look what he did with Jack Cohn in the second half of last year when they took the shackles off and the offensive line finally started playing well.
And that's key.
There's a chance this team could have even deeper talent than that team had. Definitely going to be better up front.
Yes.
So, I mean, does he deserve? I mean, he deserves what the head coach tells him he deserves. My thing is I'm not saying they should fire him, shouldn't fire him. That's not our job. What I'm saying is if he's back next year for his choice or somebody else's choice, and they get the right quarterback, Vince, you know what I mean? This could be something, dude. You agree with that?
I do, very much. I was responding to one of the people in the chat. He said, when is Brady Quinn going to have a son to recruit? He has all daughters.
I know, right?
So that's never going to happen.
Right? Freaking Brady. Come on, dude. Keith Wiegand says, if Kaiser's healthy, the linebackers should be Collie, JD, and Kaiser. Maris was horrible this week. I mean, again,
we talked about that.
Can't make all those overreactions.
Exactly. This is a vacuum game. This is a vacuum
defense that has nothing to do with the defenses you're going to face.
Right.
Because here's the deal. Maris was tremendous against Clemson.
Correct.
He's one of the reasons
you won that game.
Right. You're going to bench him against Boston College, who is a lot like Clemson.
Right.
Because of how he played against Navy, who's not at all like Clemson, or Boston College or anyone else that you would play. I mean, Keith, I don't disagree that he wasn't good. I just think the reaction to it is just unwise.
Yeah.
John Erickson with a question. I haven't seen you in a while, John. Brian and Vince, what was your take on Coach Freeman saying, if you choose to be honored on senior day, you are not coming back? At least that's what he didn't say it like that. I mean,
it was close.
Yeah,
he basically said
I'm
if you don't have eligibility.
Intent.
Yeah.
The intent, like that makes it sound like if you choose to go for senior day, you're not welcome back. Right. That's how I take John's question. That's not what he said. What he's saying is guys that have told us they're not coming back next year, fifth-year guys out of eligibility. If there's a veteran that's like, hey, I'm going pro, then, like Isaiah Foskey may have told them when he's coming back, hey, guys, I'm coming back for my last year, even though Isaiah has another year of eligibility. He's done after this year is kind of how I took that.
Yeah.
Because what you run into is you have a kid who's a senior, but he's a redshirt junior, and he plans to come back next year.
Right.
You're not going to do senior day twice.
And there's guys, Josh Lugg, this will be his third senior day.
Yes.
And it's to me, that cheapens it. Like, senior day is supposed to be special.
It's your last time running out of the tunnel. Correct.
In theory, it should be your last home game, right? I mean, that's the point of senior day.
Right. Now, if Cam Hart goes out for senior day on Saturday because he thinks he's going to leave and decides in a month he wants to come back. I highly doubt the Nerds like, nope, sorry, you went
out for senior day.
I don't think that's what I'm saying. I don't think that was the intent of it.
Right.
Like if Isaiah Foskey
are coming back,
right, decides he wants to come back in a month from now, but thinks he's leaving now, and honestly, if I'm telling a kid, I would rather you err on the side of do it and then change your mind and come back than a guy who says, no, I think I'm coming back, and then doesn't go through it. And then a month from now realizes like, hey, I'm leaving. And then he misses out on that senior day opportunity. It's just more of the guys that know they're not coming back. So I didn't take it, Vince. I didn't take it as an ultimatum.
It's not as a punitive ultimatum type situation.
Right. And that's kind of how I took, and John may have not been asking it that way, but that's kind of how I took John's relaying of.
Right. And I'll just use the Josh Lugg example again, right? He knew he was coming back, and yet he still had to participate in senior day. And this is its third time. It cheapens the moment. And that's not what senior day is supposed to be about.
Right. Okay, let's get down to Milton Fan 15. Brian, Navy seemed tailor-made for Chris Tyree. What do you think is the reason for such limited reps? I think this is simple, Vince. They went into this game basically thinking we're going to run our game plan that we've been running. This is one of my biggest criticisms. We're going to just do what we do. Not really respect them. The pass game, Tommy does a really good job of saying we're going to attack who you are in secondary. In the run game, with the exception of a couple games, they've been very much just this is who we are, this is what we do, try and stop it. Yeah. And that's not what they did against Clemson.
Correct.
They did that in philosophy, but the way they went about it was very creative and very mixed. And they just tried to regurgitate that, a watered down version of that against Navy, and it just didn't work. So
correct.
I think it's that instead of saying, hey, we're going to use Chris Tyree for this, or this. He's just dead set on we're going to be a duo team, and Chris Tyree is not a duo back. And, if he's going to be a duo guy, I would rather Chris Tyree not play than keep hammering him inside of the middle of duo. I'm serious.
Right, that's just not –
because you're not doing that kid any favors by having him do that.
Right.
So it's not what he does best. So here's one. I'll have you address this one, Vince. Reese's inexperience is showing because he doesn't have a number one quarterback. He hasn't shown the ability to call the game for Drew. If things go south, how would you coach him to fix that? Because I have an opinion of this, Vince, but I want to give you a shot to address this first.
For me, I don't care if you have a quote-unquote number one quarterback. Your number one quarterback is the guy that you're playing. So you have to be able to play to the strengths of your quarterback. And yes, that takes time. And that takes, learning your guy and all of those different things. I guess my issue is the consistency as far as knowing your guy. Like, it felt like he knew his guy early on when he was playing North Carolina and a couple of other games where they had success. And it's kind of dipped, and then it's kind of risen, and then it's kind of dipped, and it's and that's
that plays into the question for Matt is call it when things go south.
Yes, and you have to know your guy, and you have to know what he does well. You can't overanalyze what the X's and O's tell you. You need to be better at knowing what your quarterback is telling you. That's my thing.
And you want to know why Notre Dame didn't run more screens? Drew Pine has not shown he's a very good screen passer. He's thrown a lot of inaccurate passes on screens this year.
Yeah.
So we can complain about it, and I think but my thing is there are some screens you need to find ways to do. But, has he struck you as a really good screen passer this year? So in some ways, he is doing that. But it's kind of like in some game, we've been very critical of Tommy Rees at times, and I don't take back any of it. But I also don't want to get into the habit of just hammering him just to hammer him.
Yeah, right.
And so, some of the stuff he's calling, Vince, was, dude, you ran a crossing route against a zero blitz. That's junior high stuff, Vince. Like, that's high school stuff. At least high school stuff.
Yeah.
Possibly even before. Hey, they're blitzing everybody up the middle. Throw the crossing route behind it. Yeah, you're going to take a hit, but get that sucker out. He did that earlier in the game to Audric Estime and went for a 30-yard touchdoam. When your guy's not doing that, when your guy's not doing simple things like pull and throw the quick out cut,
not a whole lot you can do.
9 yards off the ball. What am I supposed? It's kind of like what we said last year when people were critical of the game plans in the run game. It's like when your dudes can't block anybody, there's only so many things you can do. My line can't run block. Yeah, but you need to call this play, but they can't run block. Yeah, but you need to do, but they can't run ball.
Block. You need to run the ball.
Right, but they can't run block. They're getting their butts kicked. There's only so many things you can pull up, guys, before it's just kind of like, hey, man, it's just not it. We have a super chat from SB, and he did have a question to go with that. Appreciate you, SB, very, very much. Given how poorly Kyrie and Tobias have been utilized, why should I be excited about the talent coming in next year? Well, a couple things. It's a different team, number one. Number two, they're going to have no choice but to play the young guys next year at wide receiver.
They are playing Tobias. I mean,
it was just way too late.
Game.
I get that.
Absolutely. Right. But again, if we're talking about progress and baby steps, in the past, he doesn't see the field until next year. Right. So, I mean, he saw the field halfway through the year, and it was way too late. But at the same time, he is playing now. And if he wasn't injured against Navy, he would have played again. So baby steps in the right direction. You should still be excited because there's still a bunch of talent coming in, and the talent will rise to the surface.
And they're not going to be so tight end heavy next year. They're not going to be so builded around Mitchell Evans or Eli Raridan or Holden Stace the way you are Michael Mayer. And especially if you have a different quarterback situation could change that as well. So why should you be excited about it? Because it's college football, baby. You should always be excited about what your team is going to be next year, and should always be excited to see the talent that you're going to see on display. But there's a lot of reasons to think it should be different. Will it be different, SB? I don't know. I can't tell you that.
I hope so.
But I think so. Some conversations I've had makes me think so. But, we'll see how it goes. Man.
We'll see what happens in Ireland, right? In person.
Yeah.
Right, Brian?
There you go. That's right. I'll be there. I don't know about you. It's expensive. Those trips are expensive.
Leave me behind.
We'll talk. You'll act like this is a Tim LaHaye book or something. Milton Fan with Super Chat. Vince, dust it off. I don't know what this means, Vince.
He wants me to do that voice. He wants me to do that caveman voice. There's no need for it today, my friend, but thank you for the Super Chat. It'll come eventually.
Yeah.
He loves it.
See, we're just milking you for Super Chats, Milton Fan. That's why, because you keep asking for the caveman, and as soon as he does it, we don't get any more Super Chats from you, man. Come on,
I have to be in the right mood. I have to be super
frustrated, baby.
Gotcha.
SB says, Vince, I get not reviewing the defensive film, but isn't it concerning the game plan was so bad?
I thank you for this.
It's not concerning until we go to Ireland next year.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. You don't need to review it with the players. You need to review it with the coaching staff.
In the offseason.
In the offseason. That is absolutely accurate. I'm not saying burn it and never look at it again. I'm talking about.
Well, you did say that Saturday, but it was hyperbolic. Because you don't burn film anymore. If you do that, you're like burning it. Like, dude, why is the computer on fire? I'm burning the film. You do know it's on the cloud, right? Like,
yeah, right.
Burn it all down. I got to burn the cloud and everything. No,
burning the server room just goes up in flames. But no, what good?
According to the movie Glorious Bastards, that's very dangerous to burn film.
Yes, it doesn't do you any good to show it to your players, but as a coaching staff, 100%, 100%. But that's not what you're doing right now. That is an.
Isn't it concerning? Is it concerning, Vince? Yes, it's concerning, but it just doesn't matter until you go to play in September to play Ireland next year.
Right.
And that's what I say. They've played 10 games. There's been 8 games where I felt the defensive game plan was at least good.
Yes.
It hasn't been great often, but it's been good.
Right.
This was a unique thing because it's such a unique offense. Oh, Irish in Ohio, Brian, not throwing shade at Dante Moore, but take the names away from the film. Minchie looks just as good, if not better than Dante. Never thought Dante's film was 5-star worthy. Well, I mean, look, I did. So if you don't, I mean, we're just not going to see eye to eye on this. Dante's not had a great senior year, but I'm sorry, Dante Moore throws the ball as well as anybody in the country, in my opinion. And I get that he did Notre Dame dirty or whatever. I'll put it like this. My issues with Dante Moore, my concerns about Dante Moore and whether or not he's going to be a bust, Vince, you know where I'm going with this. It has nothing to do with his ability to throw the football. Mm-hmm. It's up here and right here.
Yeah, exactly.
And is he going to be willing to be his own man? He's one of two things are going to happen with Dante. He's going to go to college, experience the freedom of being his own man, and thrive. Or he's going to go to college and it not happen that way, and he's going to really struggle. But when you just talk about putting the film on and spinning it, I love Kenny Minchie, but Dante's just better. I'm sorry. Dante is just a really talented player. Does that mean it's kind of like the running back conversation, Vince? I don't know that Audric Estime or Logan Diggs are individually as good as Will Shipley, but he chose to go somewhere else, and they got two really good football players
that complement each other very, very well.
Fine. Yeah. I'm happy that if Notre Dame gets Kenny Minchey, I'm going to be very happy about that. But I'm also not going to get into the thing, and I'm not saying, I don't know how you're doing it. I'm taking you at your word that you genuinely believe Kenny Minchey's better. That's cool. I'm talking about me here, so please don't take this as a cut at you. I'm not going to change my stance on Dante just because he didn't come to Notre Dame. Again, that's me talking, not projecting onto you. I believe you think that Dante's not that good. There were people, Notre Dame fans, that didn't think Dante was that good when everybody thought they were going to get Dante. That's totally fair. But just for me personally, I'm just not changing my mind because of that. Dante's really flipping talented. If he can get his head on straight, then he'll be a heck of a player. If not, he won't live up to expectations.
I just hope his advisors stay in Michigan. If that happens,
that's the one thing that gives me. I'll say this: I do think Kenny Minchey might have a higher floor than Dante because he's really smart.
Yeah,
he's very mature, and he comes from a much better. He's got a much better foundation,
surrounding cast, and the whole thing,
parents and people, coaches and stuff around him.
Right.
So I will definitely go there. But upside wise, Dante's just a more physically gifted player. It's not by a country mile. Again, I think Kenny Minchey's a top 100 player. I've literally advocated to have him ranked at the top 100, and he is on SI99, which is the one rankings platform I have a hand in, helping hand in putting together with John Garcia Jr. and some other people. So, I think he's a heck of a player. I just thought Dante was a top 10 player. So, there you go. Milton Fan 15. How exciting is it to see such leadership in the underclass?
I mean, if it pans out, it's real exciting, but they haven't really had an opportunity to quote unquote lead just yet. I mean, there's potential there, right? I think there's a lot of potential there, but just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're a good leader also. So I think we need to tap the brakes a little bit on the amazing amount of leadership that's in the underclass section, but there's a lot of potential there. So of course it's exciting. It's one of the reasons I love college football is it's just so cyclical. It's like, a group moves out, another group moves in, and you get a whole nother group of people. And I love it so much more than the NFL for that reason alone. So of course I'm excited about the new guys coming in and the young guys that are here already, but they may not be good leaders. We don't know that yet. And so it is exciting to find that out. But we're at Notre Dame, so there's probably some pretty good leaders in there. But again, we just haven't seen it yet. That's all.
Yeah. Show me business, baby.
100%.
All right. Spark 5219. Is it a correct assumption that opposing team coaches are making a better adjustment for the second half than our coaches? In some games, yes, that's definitely true. Not in all games. It's not like Notre Dame has the worst coaching staff out there and they're just out-towning people every week. That's not necessarily the case. I think that at times they have been out-schemed in the second half and out-adjusted in the second half. And sometimes they're not. They just don't execute. Right. Or sometimes, like against North Carolina, I thought they were just fine in the second half against North Carolina until they got a big lead and they lost focus. This team has shown that it loses focus when it gets a big lead. That's what happened against Navy. And it's not so simple that, they scored 2 touchdowns in a row. Let's figure it out, guys. Let's get our heads on straight. It's once that thing starts to roll, it can be really hard to overcome
tough,
it.
Yeah.
Especially when you lack the team maturity to not get there in the first place, right? It's hard to just snap that thing back on.
Right.
Jason Rose, hey guys, I kind of thought Tyler Buckner was hung out to dry when he was in there. They were asking him to be the focal point of while he was getting his face beat in. Wasn't fair to him, in my opinion. Agree with that completely. I do think there's several plays that were on Tyler, but overall, I think there's a lot of merit to that, Jason. What do you think, Vince?
No, I think that's absolutely accurate. I think I can pick out a few plays in the top of my head right now that if he hits them, they beat Marshall, for example, right? And we're having a different conversation. But I think the opinion that he's yesterday's news and you throw the baby out with the bathwater at this point for Tyler Buckner is the absolute wrong take to have because he was not put in the best position to succeed overall. Now, there's stuff that he missed. Don't get me wrong. He was not perfect in those games, right? But he's still a valid contender for the starting position next year. and can be very, very good behind what I think is going to be a very good offensive line as well. So he's still in the mix, people. Like, he's still in the mix. He still has the opportunity to be a very good quarterback at Notre Dame. He's not yesterday's news, and I want to stress that.
Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker. Besides Joe Walton, Isaiah Foskey, who has been the best O lineman and best D lineman in your opinion this year, and why? You want me to go first, Vince, and then you think about it, or do you have a couple queued up already?
Well, defense, I'm going Jason Adamilola. I mean,
it's close. For me, him and Howard Cross are close.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
But I'm going with Jason consistency, and then he didn't miss games.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, Howard was their best defensive lineman the first 3 games of the year.
Also true.
Yeah.
As far as on the offensive line, I mean, Blake Fisher has become a man-child, and I really like watching him. I mean, they've got the two. They're going to have the 2 best tackles in college football next year if they don't already this year. Okay, so I'm very excited about those 2. So I will actually. I actually think that Blake Fisher has been more consistent, believe it or not, than Patterson has been. So I will stick with the other tackle.
Yeah, I gave mine on defensive line. The offensive line-wise is kind of funny. It's because it depends on when you're asking. Like early on, Patterson wasn't good, but then he's been really good lately.
Yeah.
Zeke Correll went through about a 3 or 4 game stretch where you could argue he was their second best lineman. You know, Blake was great. I mean, you could argue Blake was their best lineman against Clemson. I think I'd probably go with one of the interior guys, either Patterson or Zeke over Blake, just because Blake's been very inconsistent. But when Blake Fisher's on, he's really good. He's really good.
Yeah.
Josh also asked Vince, exactly, and he's a true sophomore. I mean, he's coming along.
I have to keep reminding myself that Joe
for a lineman that matters a lot more than it does for a wide receiver.
Because you got to remember, back in the day, I mean, not even that long ago, true freshmen and true sophomores don't play, but these guys are that good that they're playing, and they're playing at a high level, and they're kind of coming into their own at this point too.
Lee Meichenberg was
as juniors,
consensus All-American and a 3-year starter, but he didn't step into the starting lineup until his 3rd year. Blake Fisher stepped into the starting lineup the first game of his career.
Right.
Something Quentin Nelson didn't do.
Right, exactly.
You know, so
they're only going to get better, which is scary. Yeah. It's a scary proposition, but I'm here for it. I mean, I'm excited.
Here's an interesting, Vince. This is also from Josh. How do you guys feel about Jeff Sims from Georgia Tech? Do you have a take on this one, Vince?
I mean, he was a pretty good quarterback. I mean, I wasn't overly impressed. If I'm being honest with you, I never thought, man, I wish he was on our team. So as I watch him play, and I watched him in preparation for the Notre Dame games, and I watched him in the Notre Dame games. Nothing I ever saw said that's a guy I want. It was, he's pretty decent at Georgia Tech. He could probably, he can help them out. But no, he doesn't really do anything for me as a transfer to Notre Dame.
Ryan loves Jeff Sims.
Really?
And yeah, I think because the issue with Ryan is it's not even an issue. Ryan is a scout, and scouts tend to focus more on tools. So he sees athletic, big arm, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but I see a guy that doesn't really read defenses all that great, isn't very accurate, and doesn't produce. So it's like, I don't see it with him. I really don't. Not in this offense. Like, there are certain offenses I'd like to see that kid run, but not this offense.
Yeah,
so no, I
agree.
He would not be on my radar at all. Here's the last one from Josh. This is a good one. What quarterback from the BK era would have this team 10-0 or 9-1 at this point, and why? I mean, there's a lot of them.
I was going to say that's kind
Everett
of a big
Golson, Malik Zaire, Deshaun Kaiser.
Ian Book.
This is going to sound funny. Tommy Reese.
Yeah.
Brandon Wimbush. And Ian Book. Here's the thing about Ian. Ian, you do not lose to Marshall if Ian Book's your starting quarterback. You do not lose to Stanford. And the thing is I would say normally you can't beat Clemson, but you threw for 85 yards and beat Clemson this year. You wouldn't have needed Ian to beat Clemson. He could have done exactly what Drew did, but he would have beat. You don't beat Ohio State. Ian Book is not on the 10-0 list.
Nope.
Tommy Reese is not on the 10-0 list. They're on the 9-1 list. Brandon Wimbush may be on the 10-0 list because when Brandon was on USC 2017, Michigan 2018, he made that offense really good. It's just when he was off, it was like, oh my goodness. Deshaun Kaiser in 2015, this team might be 10-0. Deshaun Kaiser in 2016, this team is 6-4 or 5-5 because there's no leadership at quarterback. At Malik Zaire, 10-0. Everett Golson, 10-0, in my opinion. Is that your computer saying yes?
Yeah, like this? Yeah, it's my computer. It's like my 10-year-old computer. So I would also say, and I agree with some of the commenters, I think Jack Cohn, I think this team might be 10-0 with Jack Cohn.
9-1 with Jack. I think because the only reason I say that, because the offensive line didn't play great against Ohio State, he'd have had some of the same issues he had last year where he'd have got knocked around a little bit.
Okay. All right.
That's the only, but it would have been a very competitive game.
Yeah.
And Notre Dame would be sitting there in the top 5 because their loss would be a competitive loss. Yes. They'd have smashed Marshall. They'd have smashed Stanford.
They'd be in the conversation for
they'd have beat Clemson by 2-3 more touchdowns.
Yes.
Yes. 100%. Agree. But I feel that about several other guys too.
Yeah.
Yes,
no,
Jack
I think
that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I don't know why I forgot about Jack Cohn, but you are spot on about Jack Cohn. Yes. Yes. Good one, Vince. Arrow says, what control does Notre Dame have over their ACC games on the schedule? They are playing Wake and Clemson right after playing Ohio State and USC next year. Going to be a rough, tough 4 weeks. Number one, they have none. I mean, it's already been set.
Yeah, it's been set to like 30-35 or 20-35.
Yeah,
it's set way in the future.
Yeah, it's they really don't have any. They have control over when they play like Ohio State and teams like that, but they don't really have control over those other things. But the other thing about like Wake Forest isn't going to be the same team next year.
No.
And the other thing too is they have a bye between Ohio State and USC. So they'll have time to rest and regroup and get ready for USC. And then, Wake Forest is just not that same team.
No.
Honestly.
I don't really have. And I mean, I'm not overly worried about Wake Forest if they played them this year, to be honest. I think Notre Dame wins that game because I think they blow up that slow mesh. But at the same time, you're right. They're not going to be anywhere near what they are this year.
I think they're going to have a bye between Notre Dame, Ohio State, and USC. They have a space there now, but they have to fill 4 games in. But they still have 2 dates in between. They have dates in between Tennessee State and Central Michigan. They have a date in between Ohio State and Clemson or USC. They have a date between USC and Wake Forest, and then they have 2 dates in between Stanford and Clemson. So, and they have 4 teams to fill. They have to figure out when they're going to play Duke, Louisville, NC State, and Pitt. Now, the reality is I believe that the ACC has a lot to say on when that happens.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They have to kind of work around the ACC schedule. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. And that's something I wish Jack Swarbrick would start taking more control over. If he's able, I don't know if legally, contractually he's able to, but if he was, I wish he would do that because I'm sick and tired of the whole – they're purposely scheduling bye weeks. The entire conference almost purposely schedules bye weeks before they play Notre Dame. And you know what? You guys have lost 29 freaking straight games in a row of the ACC. You might want to rethink your bye strategy.
Go for it. Let's put to bed. In the offseason, let's not talk about how unfair it is that teams have buys before the Notre Dame
I don't think it gives them a competitive advantage. It just annoys me because they think it gives them a competitive advantage.
And so do the Notre Dame fans. They think it gives them an advantage too. It's not fair.
They've won 28 or 29 straight games? It was 27 going into Clemson, I thought. Or was it 26?
It was 26. So
27 straight regular season games against the ACC.
Right.
So, yeah. And Clemson had a bye before Notre Dame played them this year as well.
Yeah.
It didn't work out really for them.
And Dabo said it was the best 2 weeks that they've had all season. Right. So at practice.
And several players have said that. Like, look, we thought coming in the game we were ready. We were ready for this. They weren't ready for this. And then they play Louisville, and you're like, oh, that's right. We're in the ACC. And I think the ACC is much improved, but it's not a physical league.
Right.
It's not. And Notre Dame's just a different animal, which is why Notre Dame has dominated the ACC outside of, in the last 4 or 5 years outside of the one game against Clemson. Randall Knorr, serious question that I've been wondering for a while. Does playing Navy's offense every year hurt the defense overall since it's such a curveball from what they normally see? Only if there's injuries, Vince. I mean, to me, I kind of think it
been for years.
Yeah, not any bad ones.
Game. Right.
Well, especially since they got rid of the perimeter cut blocking. Right. I sometimes think it can be a good thing because it gives you a week to kind of change things up and get your guys refocused and, kind of get out of your norm and get out of your routine. And, so sometimes it can be a good thing. to be honest with you. It just depends on how you handle it. It's like with anything. It's how you handle it.
Yeah,
D-Rock Irish, quick slant, short pass over the middle. The problem with slants are Drew Pine does not see the field really well. And you do not want a guy throwing slants that does not see the field really well. And I don't mean seeing it like, oh, he's a 6-foot quarterback. I mean, he just doesn't see the field well in ways that other 6-foot quarterbacks can. And that's a dangerous route to throw to a guy who doesn't see the field well, Vince, in my opinion.
Yep.
Because you're throwing into something that you're not seeing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have a super chat from Nick Lane.
So easy.
What's that, Vince?
It's so easy to step underneath a slant. And if you don't see a guy, and it just, a lot can go wrong.
That was my first start of my career was against Chowan College. And I'd come off the bench through previous games and played well, but got to start. And it's like I said, it's a whole different attitude. And I tried to throw a slant route. My first pass was a slant route. And I dropped back and I saw my guy coming in and I went, whoop. I was like, oh, I didn't see that linebacker coming out. Because I just, it was just that mindset, it was an experience and all. I mean, I didn't make that mistake again. And I do want to say, because I say things to make myself look bad, I did throw a 31-yard game-winning touchdown pass with less than a minute to go to win the game. I just want to point that out there. Okay. And my dudes were lined up wrong before the snaps. I had to get the receiver to the other side of the field. Then I threw the touchdown pass. But my first pass was beautiful. Hit the guy right in the chest, right in the numbers.
This is the wrong guy.
He was wearing number 57. And, wasn't my dude. So it's a thing of beauty,
It's a thing of beauty.
Bet most accurate interception you'll ever see in your entire life.
Right.
The point is, in all seriousness, I never saw him until the ball was out of my hand, just because everything was going 100 miles an hour on that first series, and you settle in and you're fine. But you don't want a kid not seeing the field real well to be throwing a lot of slants. Yeah. Nick Lane with a super chat. I'm so damn excited for next year and all the recruits coming in. Thanks again for all you guys do, Nick. You are very welcome, and you know what? You should be excited. It's a different era. It really is. They're doing some really fun and exciting things from a recruiting standpoint. There's no doubt. Sid Irish. So I'm always getting on Sid because he always says things that I disagree with or that are negative. So when he says something I like, I want to bring it up. And I love this idea. Pull out alternates for USC. Whites with green numbers, a la Sugar Bowl 1992, and also kind of similar to what they did in the Cotton Bowl in 2018. Although, did they have green numbers? I thought they just had green cleats and gloves. I'll have to go back and look that up.
I don't think they had green numbers, but I
think the green was all the cleats and gloves, right?
Yeah.
But Vince, I'd be down with that.
Oh, I'd be 100%.
That's
one of my favorite. That's one of my favorite. I wouldn't even call it an alternate jersey, but because it's not like completely alternate. It's my favorite away jersey that Notre Dame has ever worn, ever. And I love that jersey. I love the white with the green numbers. We
were correct, Vince. They did wear the normal. They just had the green cleats and gloves.
Yeah.
But their jerseys were blue. Vince, I have said this. Tell me if you agree. I would actually not even have that be my alternate. I would have that be my road jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I would make the road uniforms for Notre Dame green numbers. Flat out would. Yep. Not an alternate. That's your numbers. That's your road jerseys.
Absolutely.
Flat out.
Yep.
Flat out.
Completely agree with you.
So I love that look.
I would too.
I love that look. Yep. All right, here we go. Brian Denbo, how close is Dante to being another Spencer Rattler? Very different. Number one, I never thought Spencer Rattler was that talented. Just my opinion, I never was high on his game. Then you hear stuff about him personally, and you're like, it's not. I don't think Dante's a bad kid. I just think Dante has a very domineering situation around him.
Correct.
And he doesn't have the personality to step up and say, this ain't happening, like some other guys do. Doesn't make him a bad kid. Doesn't make him have an attitude problem. I've never heard anything about that. Matter of fact, most kids love Dante.
Yeah.
Most recruits love Dante. That's why so many kids wanted to come play for him.
Right.
Completely different type of kid. Now, could he end up busting like Spencer Rattler? Sure. But for completely different reasons. I think Dante's a good kid. I have no issues with Dante. I just think Dante is just not – he was not willing to take control of his own situation.
Right.
And you know what? I know a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds that weren't willing to do that.
Me too.
But that's just the reality of it. Jay Carr, is Rocco Spindler going to start at guard, be a starting guard next year?
Maybe.
Yeah, he'll battle.
Maybe. Yeah, he'll be one of the people up for it. I mean, because you figure Christophic, you figure Billy Schrauth, you figure Rocco. Those would be my top 3 off the top of my head.
Michael Carmody, possibly.
Okay.
Charles Jagsaw.
Yeah. I mean,
Tai Chan.
It's going to be.
Tai Chan's one.
Yeah, it's going to be a competition, which is what it should be. And there was another question. I don't know if I started.
It's very next one. Yeah, way too early. But any thoughts on next year, on the interior line next year? And that's this to John Erickson's question. Same thing, Vince. It's center's locked down as long as Zeke's healthy.
I agree.
There's going to be a big battle at guard next year. Big one.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, though. And somebody asked if next year we need to worry about there being a 3 to 4 game learning curve. And to me, the answer is no, because you've got now consistency at the coaching position.
You also have Navy and Tennessee State to start off with.
Well,
it's a little bit different.
There's
I think every offensive line that's replacing more than one guy has somewhat of a learning curve.
Yeah. It's
just not going to be as stark as this year where you had new guys and a new coach.
Right.
They don't have to adapt to the new coach. This is the point Vince is making. They don't have to adapt to the new coach the way they did last year.
Right.
And
the coach is
part
of it.
And the coach is better.
I think that's part of it.
And you had dudes moving around.
Right. And he was having to make some changes from a fundamental standpoint. And you were starting from, not only did he have to erase some stuff, but then he had to start
there was some deprogramming going on.
Absolutely. And so they don't have to worry about that part of it going into next year. And I think that will allow them to be better earlier for sure. And you're right. The schedule lines up better from a competition standpoint, right? You can make mistakes and get away with it.
That's right. Okay, let's go. We've got a couple more here. Milton fan, does 2023 Notre Dame offensive line have same issues? Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
It takes 2 to 5 games. It didn't take 5 games to figure this out. It took 2.5.
Took 2.5. Yeah.
I mean, they started to figure it out second half against Cal, and against North Carolina, they dominated. Do they start out Joe Moore style? I mean, look, with all due respect, I could find a lot of years in the Lou Holtz era where Notre Dame didn't come out of the gate the first couple games playing lights out football. Everything is better, right? When we the further we get away from it. I don't remember John Elway throwing an incomplete pass from my childhood. I know he threw a lot, but I don't remember him. You know what I mean? Like,
business history in your head.
Yeah. My mind of my favorite player when I was 10, he never threw any incomplete passes. I don't remember Tony Rice throwing but a couple incomplete passes when I was 10.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I'm not I think they'll be fine to your point. So.
Sorry, I keep starring stuff. You can ignore
It's okay.
Me.
It's okay, man. Hey, you're the one I'm worried about needing to get out of here. I'm fine. You know me, I can go all night. Vince is like, we don't get to do mailbags very often. This is fun. SB, Brian, how much time did you spend at Young's Dairy while you were at Wittenberg? I don't remember ever going there, to be completely honest with you. I was always so dang busy, man. They worked me like a dog. And back then, Vince, we didn't have digital film. So I had to cut up the film, get in my car, meet the GA for the other team halfway, and exchange the film. Yeah. And you know how much gas money they gave me when I was at Wittenberg? Bam. None. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I learned a lot of football from Joe Fincham, but I also learned how not to treat people. You know what I mean? But the OC that we had there was a really cool dude, a guy named Scott Isfording. I think he's at Ohio now. He was a really good dude. I liked him. Yeah, that was, man, I didn't have time to do hardly anything. So back then, man, it was rough. It was way different work for Mike Donnelly because he always tried to take care of you. It's just every coach is different,
Yep.
Savage Cyan Fitness. So how much of a percentage do you think Kenny Minchie will commit to Notre Dame after decommitting from Pitt? I'm not going to put a percentage on it because this is that kid's moment. But like, what I'll say is this is kind of not hidden. He didn't decommit to reopen his recruitment. He decommitted with a purpose. Now Notre Dame just has to make sure that things go well on the visit this weekend. But I mean, he decommitted with a purpose. And that's
usually the case at this point.
Everybody can kind of read between the lines what that means. That's not a hidden secret. That's just kind of the thing. Yep.
Thing. I like that.
Mike Huff, I don't think Zeke's locked. Zeke is so good it's locked down, not by a long shot. I mean, agree to disagree. It's not that he's so good. He's a veteran. He's been pretty good this year after the first couple games, and there's nobody else that's a better fit there. That's just going to be better. There's no other center. You're not going to take Zeke out of the lineup to move a potential guard to center. I just think Zeke's been a pretty darn good football player most of this year. So Mike will have to agree to disagree, but we do appreciate the chat. We are not Marshall. What's crazy is the 2023 roster will be uber talented, yet we still have a major question mark in the QB room. It's way too early to say that. First of all, he thinks Tyler Buckner sucks, so that's never going to be a conversation starter with him. But number two is how can I possibly agree or disagree with you when I don't know who's going to be in the quarterback room next year?
Right.
You know, like if CJ Stroud says, you know what, man, I really love those golden helmets and I can't see myself going pro before I get a chance to wear the golden helmets. Well, okay, we have a different conversation, right? I mean, how do I know who the quarterback's going to be next year? Could there be a chance that there's a major question mark in the quarterback room? Absolutely, there's a chance because of the unknown. But let me see who they get to transfer first before I just assume it's going to suck.
Yeah.
We're not even done with this season yet, and we're already assuming next year's quarterback room is going to be bad. Beefeater with a question says, Brian, does the quarterback's grip on the football for a pass depend on what he is comfortable with? I've seen some people throw the ball with the index finger close to the point of the ball. Well, those are people that have giant hands, usually. If I would have put my finger, because I don't have very big hands, if I'd have put my finger on the back of a football, I'd have been throwing the balls and went like this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And it would be like
But you look at like Troy Aikman, he'd have like 2.5 fingers on the laces, and his finger was like all the way back up because he had giant hands.
Right. And you can still spin on it.
But even guys with the same hand size, you'll see 5 guys with the same hand size that grip the ball differently. It's just what they're comfortable with, what they grew up, how they grew up throwing. You'll do some minor tweaks to a guy's grip, but you only tweak a kid's grip if there are issues that come from the grip. So sometimes your grip can create an inconsistent release point. Sometimes your grip can cause the ball to come out of your hand in a direction that makes it hard to catch. Like I didn't mind catching balls that sailed a little bit because I could go up and get it, but I hated balls that would dive. Like some guys would throw balls with the nose down. Those were harder to catch for me. You know, like nose up, I could grab that because I could get the fat of the ball. But I always had a hard time like, okay, how am I supposed to get this when the nose is down? Some can cause you to throw deep balls inconsistently. Some can cause you to throw short balls inconsistently. Yeah. So if a grip is causing execution mistakes, consistent execution mistakes, or inconsistency from a release point standpoint, then you will adjust it. But if a kid's got a funky delivery and it gets the job done at a high level, then I don't care.
Right.
You know, Steve Spurrier was really bad about that. Like Steve Spurrier would make every quarterback grip and hold and throw the ball the exact same way. I'm just not that way. Milton Fan 15. I think this is the last one, Vince. You see any more that you want to star? All right,
not
you got a star happy. Love it. What's the word on Emil? Is he a contender next year at guard? Could he start a guard? Sure. He could. I don't think so.
He's more of a tackle right now, isn't he?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think he's probably what we know now. As of right now, he still has a long way to go in the weight room. But I'll tell you, people love his athleticism, they love his strength, and they love his compete. That's a big thing for an undersized kid. You got to know a young undersized kid is got a high compete level. And for what I've been told, and it's been a while since I've asked, but early on in his Notre Dame tenure, they loved his compete level. Mm-hmm. He gets after it. He's just undersized. So I think he's probably going to need another year to get in the starting lineup. I think you groom him. Here's the other thing too, Vince, unless he's just so good that, like, dude, he's clearly one of our best 5, like right now. I think you want to leave him a tackle and groom him behind Joe Alt. Right. Let's be honest, folks. You're going to get you've got about at 3, let's just say perfect world situation. You've got 17 more games left of 17. Joe Alt at most.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that's 3 this year and 14 next year.
A decent possibility of the right tackle being the same way. So you might have
barring
to have
injury, enjoy these next 17 games of Joe Alt. And so you want to make sure that Emil Wagner is getting a full season of tackle work, not playing guard, and then you try to move him to tackle, unless he's clearly one of your best 5.
Yeah.
That's the exception. So
here we go.
Vince, I believe that's going to – okay, here we go.
Here, give me that one, and then we'll I think we're good.
Okay. Brian, who will be the higher draft pick, Alt or Fisher? Right
now, Alt has, I think, more going for him from his dad was in the NFL.
He's more advanced.
He's more advanced technically, I think, than Blake Fisher. Blake Fisher would be looked at as more of a project at the moment for the NFL.
Yeah, but he's not even draft eligible to next year.
Well, and that's the thing.
What you're saying.
A year from now, we may be having a completely different conversation. All I can go on is where they're at right now.
Right.
It's alt.
Right.
But
if they were both going into the pros this year, it's clearly alt.
Yes.
I think both have top 10 NFL draft pick potential. I think Joe Alt's closer to that potential right now. I think of the two right now, Blake is going to need the extra year if I needed to project one, because of, like you said, Joe Alt's more advanced because Joe Alt, his dad's like 10, wasn't he like a 10-year NFL veteran as an offensive lineman?
Long enough to get a
pension, he's a little bit
like,
advanced there. Right. Yeah. But the other thing too is Blake, the light could go on for Blake next year and all of a sudden he becomes a star. So, the thing for me is, Vince, is I could see Joe Alt being a higher pick next year if they both come out, but then Joe Alt being pick number 8 next year, and then Blake coming back and being pick number 5 the next year, where he wouldn't have gone, you know what I mean? And the other thing too, Vince, is need. Yeah. And some teams look at a guy and say, hey, we love this kid more than others for whatever reason, and you fall in love with him. I mean, there's so many things that could happen on where guys get picked where.
Right.
Like if Quentin Nelson doesn't get picked at 6 in 2018, it's not a guarantee he gets picked at 7 by the next person. Right. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Yep. So it just depends. It depends. So, and then also how people project Blake. Somebody said so there's going to be some teams that project Blake as a guard, and they're just they're not going to have him as high. But teams that view him as a tackle are going to view him higher. But Joe is much closer to being that type of player right now than Blake is. But Blake has enormous upside. He's just
absolutely
he's not as close. Then the last question, Vince, is from Keith Wiegand. Do you guys think Notre Dame can get to 28 commits in the 23 class? Yes, they can. Will they? Probably not.
Where are they at
But if
now?
the right combination, they're at 23.
Okay.
They want a quarterback, one more skilled player on offense, another offensive lineman, and then an athlete is what they're shooting for right now. So
27.
That'd be 27. If the right guys jump on board, they can get to 28, but it just is going to take. It's going to take. As of right now, if you were to ask a Notre Dame coaching staff, who will it be? Well, they'd say no, we can't get to 28. But there will be kids in December that say, "Hey, I'm not coming back next year."
Right.
And that will then say, hey, okay, that they weren't, because here's what happens. There are certain kids aren't coming back. Okay, Jarrett Patterson's not coming back. Right? Josh Lugg's not coming back. There are certain guys that just can't come back. So you take them off the 85, right? Then there's guys that we're not bringing back. We're not bringing this guy back as a 5th year. We're not bringing that guy back as a 5th year. There's certain guys say, look, there's 6 guys that are NFL draft eligible. We're going to kind of assume that we're going to, save room for 3 of them. Yeah. And then if all 6 of them go, then, hey, an extra spot or 2 open up. Some of those spots are going to get used by transfer. Some of those spots are going to get used by 5th-year guys. But the other thing, too, is they also, by that point in time, Vince, will have a better chance of a better feel for who's going to be in the portal. And that may say, hey, look, we're not going to go to 28 now because we want to use that spot because this kid's in the portal that we didn't think we were going to have a shot at this particular position. And we'd really like to use that spot now because we didn't think there'd be a kid in the portal that we could get at that position. Now there is. Yeah. So there's so much more to it now than there was before. But 28 is an
signing
option.
Days, and you've got just things happen between those 2 signing days. And
28 is possible. It's not what they're shooting for right now. They're shooting for 27 right now. Some things that have to happen between now and December 19th, or just in February, the first, was it Wednesday of February, before we would get there. So now that is it, Vince. That's the end of our show. Okay. I'm glad we did the mailbag, Vince. You and I both said before, this is going to be a short show. Yeah. Because I just didn't want to talk about Navy anymore. Yeah. But once we got into the mailbag, man, we're having some fun. So
we ended up doing 90 minutes of the mailbag.
Yeah, we're like, man, it's going to be a short show. We're like maybe 30 minutes. We'll do mailbags upon further review. And then we got into it. And somebody said, any chance Keon recommits, y'all, just listen. It's not happening. Just
let it go. It's okay.
I know it's the dream. And trust, there's nothing I would love more than for Keon to come back. Would love it. He's a great kid. He's a phenomenal talent, but he's not coming to Notre Dame. For the same reasons he decommitted Notre Dame. I'll say this. There's nothing I've ever predicted that I would like to be more wrong about than me saying there's no way Notre Dame gets Keon Keeley. Nothing would make me happier than to be wrong about that, because I love that kid. I think he's a great kid, and I think he's a tremendous talent. It's just not happening. It's just not happening, folks. So, but I hope that I'm proven wrong.
Yeah, no doubt. I'd love for you to be wrong on this one.
Yep. Yeah, but I'm not, unfortunately.
But I'm not.
All right. So everybody, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, subscribe to this channel, share the podcast. If you're listening via podcast format, give us a 5-star review. We would greatly appreciate it. Sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And check out the merch store. We've had a lot of people buying merch the last few days. There's a lot of cool stuff. I got a couple new items that I'm going to add. Yeah, for Vince.
Coming up.
I got a couple. It's an Adidas pullover with an embroidered IB logo that's going to be on the store here very soon. So, Christmas, I'm going to probably add some new stuff to the store. Just some things that we have that I'm going to add to the store. So definitely check that out. If you're not a member of Irish Breakdown's message board and you want to get merch, wait till you sign up for the message board first, because if you sign up for the message board, you get a 10% off discount if you sign up for a monthly membership. If you sign up for an annual membership, however, you get a 20% off discount for your entire your entire next purchase to the IB store. So for Vince, I'm Brian. You will have a great night. We will see you again tomorrow, 1:00 show. We'll have a 6:00 show, and then tomorrow night, depending on when the college football playoff selection show is, we'll have a third show to find out where Notre Dame is ranked in the college football playoffs. So we are not going to have mesh tank tops.
I had to laugh at that.
The best part, they now have like the jumpsuits. Remember we were talking about the Irish Mafia? They now have joggers, like jogging pants and jogging. So my wife's like, you got to do it now. You got to do it. I was like, no, we're not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Come on. Never mind.
For Vince, I'm Brian. You guys have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.